Do your kids love to go to the library center in your classroom? Do they know how to care for the books properly? Can they turn the pages? And do they know where to put those books when they're done? In this week's episode of Elevating Early Childhood, we'll be learning how to work smarter, not harder, when it comes to setting your students up for success in the classroom library. I've mentored many early childhood teachers over the years, and something that I noticed many of them struggled with was the library center. And some of the issues they had in this center were that their students would mistreat the books. You know what I'm talking about. Ripping, tearing, and just general mistreatment of the books until they were ruined. There were lots of issues with putting the books away. And then there was the big one, and that was their kids just didn't like to go there. So how can we teach our kids to not only treat books well, but clean them up and love to go to the library center? But first, let me tell you a little backstory. So one year, I was working on a team of about 4 other early childhood teachers. And every week, we would take turns hosting our team meeting in each other's classrooms. And one week, I was in my colleague's classroom looking around, as you do whenever you visit another teacher's classroom, right? Because you just might get some good ideas. And I noticed that in her classroom library, she had crepe paper, like streamers, taped across the area so that the children couldn't enter the classroom library. And so, of course, being a curious colleague, I asked her what that was about. And she told me that her children had lost the privilege of looking at books in the classroom library until they could learn how to treat the books. And this really got me thinking about what it takes to create a successful library center that your kids love to go to, and they know how to treat the books properly. The number one reason young children tend to mistreat books, they rip, they tear, they generally mangle them, is because they haven't been taught how to use books or what the purpose for books is. Now, if you have students in your class who have had a lot of prior exposure to books at home, you may not have this issue as much as other teachers. But if you have students who don't have literacy in the home, they don't have books, they don't go to the library, they don't see their parents reading, then this can be a real problem. So the way to combat this problem is to start by reading books. That sounds very simplistic, but trust me, the minute you start reading books to your class and then calling attention to how you handle the book, it's going to go a long way in helping your students treat the books with the care and respect that they deserve, right? So one of the things I like to do in my classroom is to take a bucket, a tub, whatever you want to call it, a container of maybe your less precious books, shall we say. These are books that you won't really mind if something happens to them. And I use this tub of books exclusively during the first few weeks of school. So I take the tub out after I've already read aloud to the students, maybe when I'm introducing the library center to them for the first time. I take the tub of books and I put it in the middle of our circle area, right? Our morning meeting, gathering time, whatever you call it. And we take turns. We model. This is how we look at a book. Look, we take the book out. We open the pages. We turn them gently by the corner. We can look at the pictures and tell the story, right? I kind of do a book walk with them on how to look at a book. And then I invite them to try it out in our large group area. And I just give them 3 to 5 minutes to take books out of the tub, look at them, and then put them back. And of course, after I've demonstrated how to take them out and put them back, just so that I can take an informal assessment, just using my eyes really quickly to see what kind of prior exposure my students have had with books. And this informal assessment, if you will, goes a long way in informing me about what I need to do and with whom, right? So there are some students in my class who are going to need maybe a lot more help than others. And there are other students who are ready to just go to the classroom library and have at it. So I take this informal assessment by using this bucket of books. We practice every day for several days, or however long it takes for your class to get the concept of choosing a book of their choice, right? Of their choosing. They get to choose the book from the tub or basket. They get to sit down with it, put it in their lap, turn the pages, look at the pictures, tell the story, and then they get to put it away. And having you with them in the circle when you're doing that is going to be so supportive. So you can scaffold for success. If you see somebody who's decided to step on the book and use it as a skateboard, true story, you can immediately step in and remind them, what should we do with books? Books are for reading, right? Books tell us stories. So that's the first thing I would do, would be to introduce the books to the children in that manner. Now, having said that, if it's 3 months into the year and your kids are all of a sudden starting to mistreat books, now what do you need to do? That's right. You need to stop. You need to take a step back and go back to that tub of books, and you need to repeat the process, right? You can say something like, if it's 3 months into the year, let's just pretend, and you notice this is happening, or maybe it's happening after your fall break or something like that. You can sit your kids down and say, I've noticed something in centers and it's bothering me. So I thought we should talk about it. I've noticed that some of you are mistreating the books. And I just want to take some time to make sure that we all remember how to treat the books. Remember, here's our tub, and I would do kind of a reintroduction of those rules if necessary, if that's what's happening in your classroom. Now, the next issue that a lot of teachers encounter is that their kids don't want to go to the library center. And I'm going to be honest with you. I don't think there are very many little kids out there who are thinking to themselves the day before the first day of preschool or pre-K, hey, I can't wait to go to preschool and look at books today. That's not what they're thinking about, right? And this is one of the centers that's kind of artificial, if you will, right? We're creating a little environment like a real library in our classrooms. This isn't something that they probably have in their home. They may have books in their home, but it's not a classroom library type of a situation. So we're creating this artificial environment for our children. So first things first, we have to understand that. And then we have to think about what makes children like books? What makes children like reading? How do children learn to love books? So some of you have your own children, and think about your very own children. And if they enjoy reading, how did they come to that conclusion that reading was fun, that they liked it, they enjoyed it? And the answer to that is probably because they read a lot with you when they were little, right? You probably sat your children on your lap and you probably read them lots and lots of books, so many books that they started to love them. They got to choose their own book. You read it to them over and over again. They learned to love books that way. Some of our students haven't had that opportunity, right? So we have to think of that. How can we create that for our students? And then also, that thing about reading the book over and over again until they become really familiar with it and giving them choices in what they hear read aloud to them really goes a long way as well. So what does that look like in the classroom? How does that translate into what we're actually doing, right? So first things first, I would start with every time you read a book aloud to your class, and this is something I did in my class for many, many, many years, and it worked really well. Every time I read a book to the class, for example, let's take Pete the Cat. And I would read Pete the Cat aloud to my class, and I would do it with great enthusiasm and lots of expression and voices and sing-song chants, because that book is got a song that goes with it. We would incorporate movement, all that good stuff, right? And then at the end of the story, when I have the kids just hooked, like they are in love with Pete, I'll say, and if you like this book, it's going to live over here, and I will walk it to the classroom library. And I say live because that's what the kids always say, right? They always say, where does this live? Where does that live? Like these are actual houses in our classroom. So I just use their language. But this book called Pete the Cat is going to live over here in our classroom library. I walk it over and I place it wherever it goes in the classroom library. And I say, then, and if you would like to read it today during center time, you can find it right here. So I'm kind of like a used car salesman, right? I'm like, would you like this car? Let me tell you about this car. I've made it so that now I've created a trail of breadcrumbs, if you will, to the classroom library. You liked this book so much when I read it. If you'd like to spend a little more time with this book, then you can do that over here in the classroom center, in the classroom library, right? So that's one thing you can do, but that's not all. Every time I read a book aloud to my kids, and I talk about this in my book, Teach Smarter, I always say, this is one of my favorite books. I just love this book, and I know you will too. And again, that's kind of a marketing technique, right? We are marketing the books to the children. But letting them know that I love books and I enjoy books, and then I give it my all when I read that book, and I use voices and great expression and all of that, that helps them fall in love with books too. So they learn from seeing, right? We know that because the students in our classroom often act out scenarios from home that are highly inappropriate. So when we act out how much we love a book and we show that in our face and we're smiling and I hug the book to my chest and all of that, it really goes a long way in showing kids the value of books, especially if they haven't had that opportunity at home. Another thing that trips up a lot of teachers is having too many books out in the beginning of the year. Now, I firmly believe in having a lot of books in the classroom library, but not the first few weeks of school, not until we've got a few things down first. Then I start to gradually add more. And plus, I want those books that are in the classroom library to be ones that I've read aloud. It's very rare that I put a book in the classroom library that I haven't read aloud to my class, because if they're looking at books and they pick up a book, they've never heard it before, they don't know the name of it, they don't feel comfortable retelling it, right? They haven't made that connection with that book. They're most likely not going to treat it well, and they're not going to be interested in looking at it. So if I have a lot of books out in the beginning of the year, they're not going to have a lot of connections to those. Another thing you can do with your classroom library to make it a little more inviting is to make it a little bit home-like or homey, if you will. Now, I know with some of the restrictions that are in place these days, that makes it a little difficult, but think ahead to when that is over and you'll have more freedom. But things like lamps, if you're allowed, I understand some programs or schools don't allow that, and that's okay. But then again, we want to make the classroom library inviting. So it's kind of a fine line we walk there. I've used battery-operated lights, like little lanterns before, whatever you can to give it some homey feelings instead of the fluorescent lights of the classroom. You'll also want some comfortable seating, someplace where they can sit, get comfortable, and look at books so that they learn to associate looking at books with comfort, right? And you don't have to have an elaborate couch and chair set from Pottery Barn or anything like that. You can use inexpensive camp chairs from the dollar store. You can use any number of things. But the most important thing is that you find something that they can use to sit on in the classroom library and get comfortable. So now you've got some cozy lighting and some comfortable seating. And think about the way that you display the books for the children. How are they organized and how are they displayed? I truly believe that a lot of it is in the packaging of the center and how we portray it to the students. Now, lastly is, how do we get the kids to put the books away? So once you've led the horse to water, if you will, and they start drinking or reading the books, now, how do we make sure that the books get put back where they belong? Because if you have a bunch of books in your classroom library, they can get really messy really quickly. And when they start to get messy, that's when things start to happen, like the bindings start to break and the pages start to rip because they're all kind of being shoved together in different places. So one of the things that I did really early on in my career that really saved me and it saved my books was to color code them. And here on the screen for our viewers, I have a book. And for our listeners, this is just a regular old picture book. And in the bottom left-hand corner, I have a little sticker dot. Just one of those little dots you get at the office supply stores, nothing fancy. And I have used packing tape to cover this dot. Why packing tape, you ask? Well, of course, because the first thing they want to do when they see a sticker is peel it off. I've never had a problem with children bothering the packing tape, though. So the stickers stay on forever. If you just put them on and you don't cover them, they will pick them off. Now, this book is that I'm holding here is Itsy Bitsy Spider. So what I've done here is take all the books that are in this certain genre, which is nursery rhymes, and I've placed them together in a tub And all of the books in this tub have the yellow sticker in the bottom left-hand corner. And then on the end of the tub that they go in, there is this sticker, the same yellow sticker. So they take the book, they look in the corner, and they match it to the tub or basket. They match it to that color and they put it in there. And that is how I get my books to be returned to the correct location and to be cleaned up properly. So the next question you probably have is, how many books should I put in the classroom library? That's another one I get asked really often. And the answer is that depends on what program you work in. So I like to personally have a lot of books in my classroom library. Of course, not in those first few weeks or even months, but eventually work my way up to probably 6 books per child. Now, that doesn't mean there's 6 books in a box, 1 box for each child. No, not that. But I'm just talking about in general numbers of books that I have, because I have a tub for each of the different genres. I have a tub of nursery rhymes. I have a tub of fairy tales. I have a tub of books by Eric Carle. I have a tub of books by favorite authors or books about the alphabet, things like that. There are some programs that advocate for just 1 book per child in the classroom because they say it promotes children resolving conflict and sharing and all that. And that's great. Good for them. But I disagree. And I prefer to have many more books than that because there are lots of opportunities throughout the day for children to interact and share and problem solve and take turns with things. I don't think the classroom library is the place for that to happen because books are different than everything else. Books are something that don't come naturally to children. They don't always feel confident in reading or looking at books. And so we have to be really careful that the classroom library is stocked with their favorites in multiple copies of their favorites as well. So after I read Pete the Cat to the class, you can bet that a good portion of the class is going to want to read Pete the Cat too, but there's only 1 copy. And I don't want to have a child who goes to the classroom library who's like so psyched to read Pete the Cat, get there and then bounce right out because they're like, oh, the book is gone. So I like to have at least a couple of copies of the favorites. And the favorites would be like Chicka Chicka Boom Boom and Pete the Cat and all the classics, right? I like to have several copies of each of those really popular books so that I want to keep the kids. I want to draw them like moths to flame, right? And now one of the obstacles that many teachers experience, teachers all around the world, is that we're told to have a library center in our classrooms, but quite often we're not given the books to make it happen. So we're being told about how great it is and all the things we can do to make it work, but yet we're not given the tools to do our job. And so over the years, I've perfected my budget teaching methods on ways to procure really inexpensive books. And so it requires you to think outside the box. And it requires several years, to be honest, to build up your collection to get enough of books to make this work for you. And some of the places that I like to get books are garage sales, tag sales, those types of things. Those are great places to get books because if you think about it, a family has a child and then that child only looks at the books at the preschool age level for just a couple of years. And so that book or those books are only used by 1 child. Wow, that's great because that means those books are usually in great shape. And we can take them and use them because our books don't tend to last as long because they have a lot of kids touching and interacting with them every single day. And so garage sales and tag sales are a great way to build up your classroom library. Another way is used books. And there are plenty of used bookstores out there still. They do still exist. And I would go to stores like Half Price Books or Books A Million, and I would get inexpensive copies. Another one that is really great is if your local library has a book sale. So these are books that the library no longer needs or wants, and sometimes they're brand new and they were donated, but the library didn't really need any more of that particular title. So these are fantastic, and you can get books for like a quarter sometimes at these types of sales, really good books. So I tend to save up and go to my annual book sale once a year, and that's how I get multiple copies of a lot of books. And then, of course, is everyone's favorite, and those are those scholastic books. So if you're a teacher in a program or a school or childcare facility or a Head Start program, you qualify for getting books from Scholastic. Also, if you homeschool as well. And they often have very inexpensive or less expensive than bookstore books. And sometimes they have exclusive titles as well. And of course, they curate those books into collections by age group, which is also very helpful. And so if you sign up for a certain age group, they'll send you their information each month about the books they're featuring that month. And then you can stock up. And they often have very inexpensive ones. So those are some ways that you can stock your classroom library. I wish it was easier. I wish there was an easy button we could push for the classroom library. But until there is, those are some tips to help you out. When young children know exactly where to find the books they love, and they feel confident reading those books, and they can handle and treat books carefully, and they have a comfy place in the classroom to look at those books, your classroom library center will go so much more smoothly. And you won't go broke from buying new books for your classroom every single year. Now, we also have some resources for you over at Pre-K Pages. And first up is our classroom library blog post. Here you can see pictures of many of my different classroom libraries that I've had over the years, and you can get tips as well as more info about how to set up and organize your classroom library. And another resource we have for you at Pre-K Pages is our book handling skills kit. This will help you teach your kids how to interact with and care for books. And finally, we have our Center Essentials Guide. It's everything that you need for setting up successful centers in your early childhood classroom. So if you're interested in learning more about the library center or any other center in your classroom, materials lists, and how to set them up, then you might want to download this free printable guide. Until next time, I'm Vanessa Levin. Onward and upward.